Hi, everyone. Dawn Anderson Butcher here from Live Sports and Coach Beyond. Super excited to be here with you tonight with a couple of my life friends and colleagues to talk about life skill development in youth sport, both in school-based sport and community-based sport. So tonight we don't have Dr. Bates. Sam Bates is out, and Quadrian Banks are. I got subbed in tonight, and I'm really excited to be here tonight with my co-host Ryan Virtue, who's with Positive Coaching Alliance. So Ryan, thank you for being here. I don't know if you want to give a brief introduction for yourself and say hello to the group.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for the opportunity, Don and Jim. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm really looking forward to the conversation tonight. I have my pen so that I can take notes as you're talking as well, because as a youth baseball coach, and certainly as a lifelong learner, there's opportunities like this to pick up any bits of advice and personal development opportunities from any range of speakers. So I just appreciate being here. I am regional partnership manager for Positive Coaching Alliance, so get to spread our mission across the state of Ohio, and obviously have a pleasure to work in the same space as Dawn and her whole team with the Ohio Life Sports. So incredible partners in the space, and just thankful for the opportunity to be here.
Well, we're so glad you're here, Ryan, and thanks for especially bringing your baseball expertise to the table tonight. When I thought about this session and Jim talking a little bit about life skill development through sport, the biggest fan, the biggest baseball obsessed person I know is Ryan Virtue. And so, in a typical night or in a meeting, you might see him with hundreds of baseball caps behind him in his screen. And so I'm really fortunate. We are really fortunate to have you as an expert in this space too, Ryan, on this call. So nonetheless, here's our game plan. So tonight we've got 3 goals and objectives, but mostly we're going to have a little bit of fun here. The first thing that we want to have accomplished tonight is for us to really reflect, right, on how through sport athletes learn life skills. And so we'll do a little bit of talking about that. We'll have opportunities for Q&A with our special guests. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the why sport as a social context. The second goal is really to increase our knowledge of different coaching strategies, right? So that, we always on these Coach Beyond sessions try to give a few take homes, so, well, what does this mean for a coach in practice? And what are some of the things that maybe you who are viewing this tonight or at a later time can take home with you and try to put into practice when you're out at doing this work with your kids that you're serving in the community. And then the last one is to, foremost, like think about transfer. So a lot of times when we think about life skill development, we think about it in the context of sport, like as we're playing, how we learn discipline or teamwork or problem solving or how to, make decisions on the fly. But, part of what we also want to do is have, young people that we work with take the life skills they learn at sport, right? Or they model from their coaches and apply them outside of the gym, outside of the field, as they're at school, in the community, and at work, or in their future careers post their sport career. And so I'm going to share a little bit about life sports at the end and some of the ways in which we do this, and hopefully have you come home with a few new tricks that you can use in your practice. So with that said, here we go. So next slide, Sid. So let's talk just briefly, about life skill development through sport. So, any past athlete out there on the call, any coach, anyone who's gone on to be successful in his or her career after sport, right? Oftentimes we'll talk about, hey, these lessons learned in sport, right? When I was at, the state championship soccer game playing Centerville, when I was playing for Durban High School, Jimmy, these are the kinds of things that I applied during that time or had to do in order to be prepared to then do the work I do now in my work at LiFEsports. Other people will think about, hey, the problem solving I had to do to solve the puzzle, right, on the soccer field, right, to be able to, break down the defense or, work with the strengths and assets on my team to be able to move the ball down the field and score, right? Or, how do we sort of draw upon these life skills to be able to, like, on the fly, pull up our skill set around attention and focus and regulating our emotions so that we can then excel, right, in that moment when we have to, when we're playing a game or we're talking to a being on a Zoom call like this here. So at any rate, the thing about sport that I just want to mention is that for the other part of sport that's so important, right, is that it's this context too, where we have experiences that reflect everyday society, right? There'll be conflict, there'll be challenges, there'll be fights between you and your teammates. There'll be times when you're frustrated over bad calls. There'll be opportunities where you wish you would have done something and you have to stop and think and figure out how you made a mistake and how you can make it better next time. So sport becomes this really great context where we can apply life skills, we can learn them, right? And then we can think about how we can transfer them outside later. The other thing that's really awesome about sport is it's sort of this non-sport components of the game, right? It's the relationships you have with coaches. It's the parents of your teammates who continue to model for you or take care of you or give you opportunities and access or even shape you as a young person as you develop. It's also about your teammates, right? And your peers and the relationships that you create over time and how you work together in this friend network or team network in order to accomplish different goals. The other thing that's important about sport that I want to mention is it's a hook, right? So we all love sport, we perform in sport, but it's also a hook. So kids will want to come out to play. They'll want to come out and do t-ball in the backyard. They'll want to come out at race us and get the soccer ball and kick it around out there. And so it can be a place where we can get kids, especially some of our youth that are the most socially vulnerable, right? That are the hardest to reach. We can recruit them by giving them sport, right? By putting them a soccer ball on their foot. We can recruit them, and also we can help retain them because of the fun and the excitement and the learning and mastery that happens through the game. So in the end, sport is this amazing context. And when we develop it and organize it the right way, right, to promote positive youth development and life skills, we can get a lot out of it, not just in relationship to performance and game winning, but also in relationship to life skill development and sort of youth well-being overall. So that's the context, right, for what we're doing tonight, life skill development through sport. And so it is my pleasure, right, to bring tonight to our Coach Beyond webinar series a past family friend of mine from my childhood, Jim Leyritz. Jimmy, so glad that you're here. Thank you for taking time to be here with us. Jimmy, your background stands for itself. Two-time world champion, right, with the New York Yankees. Known, for hitting numerous home runs, right, in playoffs and World Series games, right? Ones that either helped win the game, tie the game, change the momentum of a series. But most of all, what is the most exciting thing about having you here today is that you have been, a role model to me and my brother and to the young baseball players that were at Turpin High School, where I grew up many, many years ago. And so I'm just super excited to have you here, and we can't wait to learn from you a little bit about sport. So Ryan, do you have anything else to say about introducing Jimmy that you want to bring to attention, and then we'll get going on this Q&A?
I just think it's super awesome that there's such a deep personal relationship between the two of you. I think it's really cool that there's that personal friendly connection. And I'm just looking forward to diving into Jim. Obviously, we're all bigger than individual moments, but there were some big moments in your career that we'll probably draw back to, and not just focusing on what happened in those moments, but how you were prepared for those moments and what your coaches did to help prepare you for those moments. So I'm excited for this conversation.
No, thank you guys for having me. Like I said, I'm looking forward to it. And I'm sure some of the answers that I give, Dawn will have a little smirk on her face because she'll know exactly what I'm talking about when I refer to my father in certain situations. Some of the things that, like we said, we shared a lot growing up. Her sister and her mom was like a second mom to me. So yeah, this is a very personal relationship, as well as we hope the coaches and the kids can get something out of it as far as the baseball side of things too.
Yeah, Jimmy, thank you. Yeah, so just for the audience, just a little bit of background knowledge. So Jimmy and I both grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, and we went through the Forest Hills School District and ended up at high school at Turpin. And so we're both Turpin Spartans, right? And he was like a big brother to me, actually, and had a really close friendship with my older sister, Robin. And I can remember as a child sitting on in my family room on our green couch, right, with Jimmy. And I mean, Jimmy, you always had great life skills, right? And a personality and a presence in the room, that you could navigate and present yourself within. And it was kind of contagious, right? When people around you, and I know you still have that today, in the way you interact with people now. So at any rate, that's part of why I wanted to have you here today, just to talk a little bit about, what maybe was going on back then when you were, learning sport, developing your skills as a baseball player, getting prepared for big moments like you had with the Yankees and other teams that you played for, in the major leagues, and then also most importantly, what coaches did to help you get there, and then how those skills are being used to this day in your career as a professional and in the community service you do. So at any rate, with that said, I'm going to start with some questions. I'm going to let you go, and Ryan and I are going to come back and forth.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right, here's my first one. So Jimmy, what life skills, right, were most helpful for you to be really successful as a baseball player?
Well, first of all, I got to go back to, like I mentioned, my father. He was my first coach, just like most kids. But I also had a different type of father who was, anybody that knows sports or coaches from the past, he was a cross between Woody Hayes and Bobby Knight, who were two very hardcore, in your face type of coaches that wanted no excuses. And he wanted you to be held accountable for everything that you did. My father was the first one that taught me that. I remember, I was the star basketball player, the star baseball player on the golf team. I played a bunch of different sports. And the first time my father ever, when I went to him and said, Dad, I want to become a professional athlete. I was 14 years old. And I said, because I played basketball. And he goes, well, you're probably never going to play pro basketball, but you have a chance to play pro baseball. And he gave me this one sound advice. He said, it's an individual sport played as a team. And you only have to answer to two people. And I said, what does that mean? He said, at the end of the day, that you have to answer to yourself and to the man above. And he said, and the way he explained doing that was, when you get up in the morning and you look at yourself in the mirror and you brush your teeth, that you start thinking about, what can I do today to go out and either make myself better, make my team better, or make the world a better place? And look at yourself and look at God and say, okay, how do I do that? So then you go out and you try to accomplish that task for that day. And then at the end of the day, when you're doing the same thing and you're looking at yourself, you answer the same two people. And if you can put your head on your pillow that night, knowing you did as much as you could possibly do to accomplish some of those goals, then you know what? It was a positive day. And if it wasn't, guess what? You get another chance to do it again tomorrow. And it was the same, teaching me that kind of mindset that every day it starts over, and you can either do better or you can make up for a bad day each day. And I think that was such an important thing for my father to teach me at such a young age. He never knew that I was going to play for the New York Yankees in the toughest media capital of the world. He just said, hey, this is the approach that you have to be successful. So that was a huge help for me, as far as learning that mindset from a young age, knowing that, he used to say to me, there's only two times in your sport, in baseball and basketball, that you can't blame anybody else for failing. And that's when you're shooting a free throw, and it's when you step in the batter's box. And those were the two things that, it was between me and the pitcher or me and the basket. And that was really some good advice he gave me at an early age.
So I'm thinking about like the Groundhog Day movie, right? Like every day you wake up, but what a great point too, right? Like each day you have these goals and this responsibility, and do everything you can, as much as you can, to accomplish those and get better, right? And then the next day you can do it again and learn from your mistakes or grow from your learn.
Yeah, well, he knew that I was picking a sport, that you were going to fail 7 out of 10 times, even if you were good. And if you were, just a little bit better than average, like I was, that you're only going to be good 2.5 out of 10 times. And that was the thing that he really wanted to make sure to me, that I understood that accept the failing, because all that failure is going to turn around and you're going to learn valuable lessons from all those failures. There's a famous saying in one of the books that I read called The Purpose-Driven Life by this pastor named Rick Warren. And it says, I never learned any lifelong lasting lessons from my successes, but I learned a lot from my failures. And I thought that was a great quote.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, so talk to us real quick about, like, okay, so how did you do that? Right. So, like, okay, I got to be able to accept mistakes or failures, and I have to be able to, regroup quickly when I, strike, like, or when I, how did you do that? What were some of the life skills or mental skills, or outside of tenacity, right, and determination, did you learn, right, that you had to master in order to be as successful as you were?
Well, you have to have a short memory.
Hmm.
Every day was a new day. It's no different than they tell people, like I tell my dad, you were Tony Robbins before Tony Robbins. Where you wake up every day and say thank you, and you go to bed every night and say thank you, and it puts you in a different positive mindset when you wake up, and you can perform better. Those are huge things to learn at such a very young age. Some of the things that you mentioned, tenacity. I always say it's tenacity over talent. There were more guys. I played with a guy named Barry Larkin, who's a Hall of Famer, and Barry and I were teammates for many years. That guy had more talent in his little finger than I did completely, but the work ethic that I maintained was able, and I learned that, Dawn, and the guy, Pete Rose.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate at a very young age to be a bat boy in spring training with a guy named Tommy Brenneman. And Dawn, the Brennemans. And we used to be bat boys in spring training, and we used to pick up the balls for Pete Rose in the batting cage. And I asked Pete Rose at a very young age, because he was known as a guy in the clutch, a guy that could perform under pressure. I just said, Pete, what do you do? How do you prepare yourself? And he said, well, the first thing that I do is I take 300 swings off a batting tee every day. And I was like, oh, I can take 300 swings off a batting tee. That's easy. He's like, no. He goes, I take 50 to practice to get loose. And then my next 250 swings are all about game situations.
Mm-hmm.
And I play those game situations over and over and over again. So when I get in the game, I don't freeze. I don't go, oh, what am I supposed to do? When the coach gives me a hit and run or to lay down a bunt, I don't think, oh, what do I have to do? I've already practiced those scenarios ahead of time. So his whole thing was practice every day as you're playing the game. The other piece of advice he gave me that was great was, as far as every at bat, treat every at bat like it's your last at bat ever. And I said, well, what does that mean? He says, well, if you're in practice of the beginning of the season in the practice game, and you treat that bat just as important as the last bat of the World Series, you're never going to get caught up in what's going on around you. So that really made, because people always said, why are you so good under those moments? Bob Costas, the other day said, hey, one of the best hitters in the late 90s in clutch situations, and it was because of that mindset that I had that said, hey, every at bat is important no matter when it is or when it comes.
Yeah, Jim, I love this. First of all, so many great tidbits right off the bat. You're talking about practicing gratitude, right? And kind of setting your mindset. You've talked about, individual sport as a team, and I'll come back to that in a second. Accountability, the fact that you were a multi-sport athlete, really preparation and visualization through that preparation, not just the volume of swings, but how you're putting yourself in scenarios and imagining scenarios occurring and how you're going to handle yourself in that. And I love specifically too that not only, I could listen to Pete Rose stories all day long. And I love that every pitch or every at bat is your last at bat mindset. But really, your dad influenced that by really trying to instill the next play mentality, right? And that's true regardless of which sport, because a lot of coaches really harp on failure, right? And almost over drill failure. And nobody knows more that they failed than the athlete, especially in the moment, right? And they feel the pressure of that. So the really good coaches are the ones that help instill the next play mindset. And it's awesome that you had a father who instilled that at an early age as a coach. I know I mentioned earlier that you're bigger than a moment, and really this kind of comes back to the individual sport in a team sport setting. 1996 World Series, you were coming off the bench in, what was it, game 3, right? Or game 4? No, game 3.
Game four, yeah.
Or sorry. You came off the bench, and obviously that's not an easy spot to be in general, right? You got to be able to stay fresh, you got to be able to stay focused, you got to be able to, be prepared for when that moment might come and your number might be called. Take us back to that. Like, how did you stay ready to that moment? And obviously, just as importantly, how else has that preparation come up in different aspects of your life?
Yeah, when you look back on your career and you see all these moments, you have these things, you think about it and you go, you know what? There are some things I might have changed a little bit, but I wanted to play every day and I never got that opportunity. But I also, by not playing every day, forced myself to practice every different position. I played 5 different positions in the major leagues. So I had to work every single day, taking ground balls, taking fly balls, catching in the bullpen. There were so many scenarios that I had to go through because when I showed up at the ballpark and I wasn't in the lineup, there was an opportunity quite a few times where Don Mattingly was the first baseman and hurt himself during batting practice. And the coach would come up and say, hey, Jimmy, you got to play first base tonight. All of a sudden, if I wasn't prepared, if I didn't practice that, then I would not have been ready for those moments. And the only way that I was going to get more playing time is to be able to come through in those moments. And I think that mindset, like we talked about before, every at-bat's the most important one. Every opportunity is also the most important one. But you have to be prepared for that. If my one coach, Buck Showalter, used to say to me all the time, Jimmy, if you ask for it, you better be ready. And that was always the thing. And fortunately, I was that way. And then also being a catcher, I also had to become kind of a psychologist to 10 different pitchers every night, and everybody wasn't the same. And some of the things that you had to approach players were, okay, Andy Pettitte, I have to approach differently than David Cohn because they have 2 different mindsets. And so really those skills that you learned, those life skills as a catcher you learn, have just been really, really beneficial for me in my post-playing days.
Well, as a father of 5, you know how different every single person is. So that's incredible.
Yes. Yeah.
Hey, so Jimmy, I'm going to pull you back a little bit. And I know you talked a little bit about your dad, but this is really around coaches, right? So tell us a little bit about, when you were developing as an athlete, whether it be high school or, your early years in the major leagues, and I know like you're a worker. You've always been a worker. You've always had this drive. It's existed when you were 14 years old, and you said, I want to be in the major leagues. I'm going to play. Right. Tell us a little bit about what your coaches did along the way, that were specific behaviors that they maybe put in place that helped you learn some of those life skills and some of those performance enhancement skills.
So like I said, I mentioned the first 2 coaches. My first coach was my father, who also taught me that you set a goal and that path is not going to be straight. It's going to take different things to get there. Set that goal, but once you've reached that goal, set a whole nother set of goals. All right. And that was what he taught me at a very young age. And then Coach John Basiliga, who was at Turpin High School, was my first high school coach. And I made the team, the varsity baseball team, my sophomore year. And to this day, I wish more coaches would be John Basiliga because he pulled me aside after I made the team as a sophomore. And he said, hey, I'm going to treat you different than most of these guys because most of these guys are playing to have fun, to be part of a team. But I know your goal is to be, I met your dad. I know your goal is to be a professional athlete. You want to try to play this sport professionally. You have the skills, and but understand, I'm going to be harder on you, and you're going to probably end up being a leader because of that. But please don't take it personally. And I thought that was so important that he was going to give me the power to have some type of leadership role at such a young age on a team with older players. And then, for him to be able to tell me that early was so important. And I wish more coaches would have that mindset, because he said, listen, I still got 15, 20 other guys I have to develop as men, as players, and they're just not going to be under the same mindset that I want you under. And I thought that was just a great thing to recognize as a coach early on, and distinguish, and knowing that, when he started getting on me, that I didn't go, oh, why is the coach picking on me? It's like, I know why he's doing it. And I thought that was an important thing for him to as a coach, establish early on. And I think more coaches need to do that.
That's so, I mean, I heard a couple things there. He's individualizing, right? His coaching and his expectations and accountabilities, to you, and then thinking about that in relationship to the other needs or maybe motivating factors that other people on the team have in place. And then I love too that he, expected you to be a leader in that space as well, and really sort of communicated that, individually to you as well, so that you were really clear on what was going on between and among you. Did he open the door for you to feel like you could come to him too if you had challenges or needed additional supports or anything? And what else did Coach Bassett? He was my brother Chuck's soccer coach, right? And so he was formative in a lot of young men's lives back then. So
yeah, he was a great communicator. I mean, I think that's the one thing that when I talk about coaches, I have 3 boys myself, and they all played high school sports. And I look back on their coaches, and I was just so disappointed in some of them, because they're like, oh, he's not going to go to college, so I don't really care about him. It's like, wait a minute, your job as a high school coach, as a college coach, because you're not going to have a Derek Jeter on every team. You're not going to have even a Jim Leyritz on some teams. But some of these kids aren't even going to go past high school. They're not going to go past college. What kind of life skills are you going to teach them that are going to benefit them in whatever their next chapter is, or their next set? Because it's not going to be a sport. And what can you do to develop them as a man is even more important. And it's one of the most pride things I take in my 28-year-old son, Austin, who teaches at a school of 7th and 8th grade and 8th grade Holbeck athletes, is these parents come up to me and say, hey, he teaches them a lot of great skills in the baseball, but what he's teaching them as far as being a man and having character is the most important thing. And thank you for bringing him up that way. And you take a lot of pride in that.
Jim, that's incredible. And I think there's so many different layers to that, right? Because people always say, hey, sports teach life lessons. That's not true. The life lessons are only taught through caring adults within the sports space, right? And so whether that's parents, whether that's coaches, I mean, you referenced, how so many coaches are focused on developing those college and pro athletes, and to provide some statistics to it, only about 7% of all high school athletes have a chance to play any level of NCAA college sports. That's Division I, Division II, Division III. And that's purely based on roster spots, right? That's not even based purely on talent. So a lot of the focus is how do we as coaches make sure we're focusing primarily on that 93% that aren't going to go to the next level, knowing that if we do that, we are oftentimes developing more intrinsic motivation within young athletes that have the natural ability to go on top of that. And so I think you hit on so many different important things. And you specifically, Jim, that relationship with your coach in high school is really important, because did you not have an injury leading into the draft going into your senior year? So how much was the important relationship with your coach in that moment, which for so many kids at that age would be a life shattering moment? So curious, how did what were your feelings when that moment happened? Obviously disappointment, but what other feelings came up? And then how did your coach and your parents help you through that situation?
Yeah, it was interesting because again, I went out and played tennis 3 days before the draft and ended up just fracturing the side of my foot. And it was devastating. And at the time, when I first put the cast on my foot and I came home, my dad didn't know I was out playing tennis. And so I just came home and said, "Yeah, Dad." And he's like, "What did you do to yourself?" I said, "It's not a big deal. It's only 2 or 3 weeks. I'll be back playing again." Well, he goes, "Well, it's a big deal." And I go, "Why?" He said, "Because these two scouts called me up and said they're going to make you a draft pick in 3 days. And now I got to tell them you have a broken foot." You know, so sure enough, those two scouts called back the next day. They found out, they said, "Okay, we're going to pass on them." And as soon as I heard that, I was like, the reality of, wow, I just screwed up. You know, I missed a good opportunity, but because of the mindset that my dad had of, hey, you know what? Tomorrow's another day. You got another opportunity. And I knew I would get another chance. I never, and that was kind of my mindset was, okay, I missed this opportunity. I'm going to have another opportunity. One of my dad's strongest things was, if I went 2 for 4 in a baseball game, why didn't you go 3 for 4? If I had scored 20 points in a basketball game, why didn't you score 30? So it was always that, hey, okay, the game's over with. You're happy that you had a good game, but guess what? Tomorrow, you're going to do this over again. And that mindset really kind of helped me get through that problem and that setback. Rick Warren, one of my pastors out here in New York, says, a setback is only setting you up for a great comeback. And I always think that every time something bad happens, that's the first thing I say to myself. Hey, okay, I'm supposed to learn something from this. What's the lesson I'm supposed to learn? I'm willing to accept these problems. And I think that was an important lesson I did have early on in my life from my father and from Coach Pasaliga.
Well, I'm sure that carried on to so many different levels of your professional career and your personal life as well.
Well, and again, never being drafted. I never got drafted. I was 2,000,000 to 1 odds to even see one day in the big leagues. And the irony of the story I just told you about the two scouts that passed on me, they were scouts for the Atlanta Braves, who I hit the home run against in game 4. All right. And those two scouts were supposed to, they came back and watched me play. And they said, "We want to sign your son." And my dad said, "Give him $10,000. And they only offered me 5. So my dad said, Jimmy's going to college. Those two scouts were sitting in John Sherholtz's suite at that game 4 when I hit the home run. And they said, "Do not tell him, for $5,000, we could have changed this entire scenario." And when you think about it, those are the things that you think about. Like, there's a reason for everything. There's
Absolutely.
a reason certain things happen. And had I been drafted, I would have never had that opportunity.
Well, and you wouldn't maybe have developed those particular additional, life skills or setback is a comeback, right? Skill sets that you got to practice over and over again to get where you wanted to go, right? So hey, listen, let's pivot a little bit more. And now I want to, we could talk about baseball and your career all day long, right? And of course, I'll want to follow up and hear more about it. But let's talk about now that after you retired. So you stopped playing baseball, and you're a father, you're a husband, you're a friend, you're an employee. You're now working. I was thinking about I forget where you're working now. You're VP in New York. Working for AmTrust Financial, first nationwide title. Doing community work, right, where you're helping. Fellowship for Christian Athletes. You're doing work with ALS. You were just in Florida. Tell us more about, okay, I learned these life skills in sport. How have they transferred, and how do you use them in your life today, or in your adult career post the Yankees?
So there's two things that I learned along the way. One, I learned when I was playing in single A, my first year in the minor leagues. I played for a coach named Bucky Dent. And Bucky Dent is a very famous Yankee that hit a huge home run, just like I did, one year with the Yankees. But long story short on that is, I didn't know who Bucky Dent was. And when Bucky Dent was trying to tell me how to hit and what to do, I really didn't listen to him. And he was only my single A coach. You know, I still had to go to double A, triple A in the major leagues. I never thought that I would see Bucky Dent in the big leagues.
Mhm.
Well, I learned a valuable lesson from that of knowing that you can't treat people, you need to treat everybody the same with the same respect, because sometimes it can come back to haunt you. And with that argument and the fight that I got in with Bucky Dent in 1986, when I got to the big leagues in 1990, guess who was the major league coach for the New York Yankees? It was Bucky Dent. And he specifically stated when he cut me, set me down to AAA, he specifically stated the run-in that we had in A-ball as the reason why he was not letting me on that team. And guess what? That in June of that year, he got fired. 4 days later, I was in the major leagues. I learned such a valuable lesson there of, wow, you know what? You need to treat people the same way going up, because you just never know who you're going to run into again. Because all these other people that you're meeting along the way, they're trying to move up also. So that was a really, really valuable lesson I learned. But the other thing, Don and Ryan, that I had to learn was that as a professional athlete, you live your entire career as the interesting person. And what I had to learn when all of that was taken away and all of that left me, and I went out into the real world, is I had to learn to become more interested than interesting. All right. And that is a huge step for any professional athlete that has had success, that has had to change that mindset, knowing that, you know what, I can call you mentioned title insurance. I can call a real estate developer and say, hey, you know what, I'd love to have your account because I'm Jim Leyritz from the New York Yankees. And he's like, I don't care if you hit a home run in the World Series. What can you tell me that you can do for me in title? So it was really a valuable lesson to learn that, hey, I'm not the interested party anymore. I have to be more interesting to other people, or interested in other people. And that's really one of the strong points. The other strong point that I had, Don, and you know me well enough, is I'm very comfortable in a room with anybody. And one of the things that I learned very early on with my dad was you treat the janitor the same way you treat the president. And that is that, and I made that mistake with Bucky Dent. It came back to haunt me. And all I could think about was, man, I should have listened to my dad, and I might have made the big league club that year. So that was a valuable lesson too that I had to learn. And one of the reasons I've been able to have a lot of success in my business world now is just because I have put been more interested in people than interesting myself.
I bet you still work pretty hard though too, right?
Oh, yeah. No, I leave. We're finally becoming empty nesters, and I leave on March 26th to go back to New York, and I will be living in New York away from my wife from April 20 or March 26th till October. She'll come visit me a few times, but this is what I need to do because, like you, Ryan, you mentioned, I got 5 kids. I had to pay for a lot of college, so I can't just stop working. And I still got to be out there working.
And so tomorrow morning when you wake up, you're going to be like, how did I do on that Coach Beyond session? And it's going to prepare you better for tomorrow when you wake up with a clean slate, right?
Well, you know what? The more of these that I do, I learn from. I do a lot of public speaking to college athletes, to different things, and just the things that I learned from doing more and more interviews. And I honestly, you may not want to hear this, but on TikTok, and I know I'm 60 years old, but on TikTok, whenever these Matthew McConaughey's or these when they have these life things they're talking about, I press like, because more and more of those will come up on social media. And there are so many great things that you can get out of some of these talks and some of these sayings that these people have, Bible verses, everything that you can think of that really, really can help you grow as a person every single day.
Well, I'm certain there'll be a few take homes from this session today too. So, hey, so listen, we have a question or two in the chat, and I failed to introduce Sydney officially to the group when we started at 7, But Sid has been joining us in these Coach Beyond sessions, and she's an amazing doctoral student in in life sports at Ohio State. And so, Sid, do we have any good questions out there for Jim before we move on a little bit here?
So the first question that really came through the chat was when you were talking about how your dad taught you a lot about accountability and how formative that was and how important that was in getting you where you are now, where you were in your baseball career. And really the question was around how do you navigate when a student athlete comes in who hasn't necessarily learned about accountability before they're on your team, or you're teaching it on your team, but you're not seeing that reinforcement among peers, among, at home, outside, off the field a little bit. And how would you suggest that coaches navigate that when they're trying to teach accountability, but it's maybe new or something different for that student athlete?
Well, what I try to do, again, I had 3 boys that grew up, and I was trying to mentor them a little bit, is I tell them, pick 3 people that you want to be like. Pick 3 people that you want to achieve to kind of be like, and find out what they do. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to get it, to get a no as an answer. I always tell my kids, they're like, Dad, why would you say that? Why would you ask that? I'm like, the worst they can say is no. And the only way I'm going to learn accountability, the only way is that I'm going to have to answer when to somebody when those questions are asked, and more for the sake of accountability. I want to say to somebody, well, you're playing high school baseball, you're playing college baseball. Is this as good as you want to be, or where do you want to go to? What's your next step that you want to do? And find out that is, because every high school kid that goes to college becomes the best kid on his team, but now the best kid on another team that has 15 other players that were their best high school kid. So I would say as far as somebody joining a new team, I got traded a lot. I have a type A personality. I wanted to take over as soon as I would show up, but I had to learn to go, where do I fit in here? Where does my skill set help this team? And yes, I can be the best player on the team, but that doesn't mean my team's going to win unless I'm helping those other players get better. And I think that's an important thing for anybody joining a new team or a new club has to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you're saying too about teaching people to be curious and thinking about who do you already admire in your life and how can you begin to sort of model them in some ways or learn more about what they do. And before I ask the next question, we like to see if the hosts have anything else to add here. Do y'all have any other tips or tricks for coaches navigating teaching new life skills to student athletes? Dawn and Ryan?
I was too busy listening to Jimmy.
That's totally fine. Yeah,
I think the question in the chat was really this point around maybe you have athletes who you want to hold accountable as a coach, but maybe they're not getting the support from their parents, or their, grandparents, whoever is kind of in their home social support network. And so there's this sort of, are you being too hard on them? Are you having too high expectations? Or how do you kind of navigate the expectations for accountability on the field and also in life and in school and in academics in a way that is still supportive of the athlete, but doesn't kind of, be so far removed from what maybe the parents might want or think is appropriate? That's a tricky one, right?
Yeah, and it changes at every level. It changes from high school to college to minor leagues to major. It will change at every level. And I think the most important thing when I speak to high school kids is I just say to them, listen, you have an opportunity through a sport to get a college education. And there's a lot of other kids that are smarter than you. There's a lot of kids that have more talent than you. But guess what? If you go to college and you play a sport and you get your grades and you go out in the real world for an interview and you go up against a Harvard grad who has a 4.7 grade point average, that's a genius. And the employer looks at you and goes, oh, you played a sport and you got grades. I know you know discipline. I know you know teamwork. I know that you have to show up on days that you don't want to show up. And you know what? Those skills are more important to me to hire you over somebody that might not have that gone through that same experiences that you've already been through. And I think that, for me, my wife and I talk about it all the time. It's the experiences, the more experience you can go through is what is going to be your teacher as you get older.
Well, and Jim, I think you hit on it earlier too, is the importance of relationships, right? And so as a coach, it's really important that you develop a relationship with the parents as well as with the athletes. We have a lot in youth and high school sports where it's, hey, I'm the coach, you stay out of it, right?
Yeah.
By the way, I need you to get your kid here on time or 30 minutes early every day. I need you to fundraise. I need you to do all this other stuff, but don't talk to me about your kid, right? And it's really not the best situation for anybody in that setting, because you should be able to go to the parent and explain to them why you might be a little bit harder on their particular child. Or even if you do everything in your bag of tricks as a coach and you don't feel like you're getting the response, having a relationship to go to the parent and say, hey, what else can I try that works for you at home or has worked in other aspects of your child's life? So you hit on it earlier, just that relationship piece and how important that is as well.
Good, Brian. Sid, is there another question or two, or?
We just got one in, and so I'll ask one more question and then we probably will transition. But this is from Bill, and Bill asked, I just completed my first season as a high school soccer head coach at a startup program. I have a wide range of talent and experience on my team, ranging from girls who are all state in other sports to literally beginners. How do you suggest ensuring life skills for each and every player in that wide range?
Well, you definitely have to have a different approach with each one of them. You have to kind of figure out the ones who are doing this because they do want to go further than just being on a team. But you also have to make sure that those that are on the team are included in everything that you do. And I think that's when I mentioned John Bassaliga, that's the one thing that he did so well, is that he made the first person on the team feel just as important as the last person. And again, I'll go to say Joe Torre, who was my manager with the New York Yankees, very successful. But he was a great man. He wasn't such a great manager of baseball. He was a great manager of people, because he knew how to keep egos in check. He knew how to, like I said, treat everybody the same way. If I'm coaching with different skill sets, with different levels of players, it's my job to really understand, okay, can I go take Tommy, who's very talented, very skillful, and teach him, say, hey, listen, you got a lot of talent. You're going to have to work. I'm going to make you work harder than Joey, who's just on the team because he wants to have fun and he wants to be part of this team. But so be ready for me to call on you to show how to kick a ball, how to shoot a basket. You have to know certain kids that you can pull out and say, hey, you show them how to do this. Because, and make sure that if Joey's your number one guy and Tommy's your last guy, that maybe Joey shows Tommy how to do that skill. And that way they both feel included, from the high level talent to the low level, the lower level talent. So I think that's important too.
Yeah. I love how you call out different roles on the team as well. Like you can actually have kiddo or, young people model to their peers as well, this life skill development. So I think that's it for questions for me. So I'm going to transition it back over to our amazing host, but thank you so much, Jim, for answering those questions.
No, thank you, Sydney.
Point, Jim, too, about leadership, right? And so like maybe some, there are different roles that athletes on a team can take. So they may not be the most skilled, but they might have other leadership qualities or life skill qualities or contributions they can make, to teams in different ways, right? And then also those that are more.
I think Don might have just froze. So
I think she got the Cincinnati freeze.
Yeah.
We have
love
a tornado warning here in Columbus, so maybe it hit.
Yeah, no, all good. But I think I'll just, one of the things that you said Oh, there's Don.
There
He's back.
You
Ronnie
froze.
froze for a moment.
You froze for a moment, so we missed that.
Oh, did I? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ryan.
No, you're good. Do you want to finish your thought there, Don?
I don't know what I was saying. Go ahead.
No problem. Jim, I think there were a couple of things that you said in terms of what you were looking for as an athlete, and just as an individual in terms of like find 3 people who you want to be like, right? And ask them questions and be really curious. I think Sid pointed out the importance of curiosity. So for the coaches that are in attendance, I think it's really important to really self-reflect and think, okay, if we're asking our kids to go and try to find 3 people, we need to be one of those 3 people, right? And we need to look in the mirror. And if we know, hey, we want these kids to be able to look up to us and look up to us in more than just as a coach-player relationship, look at us as a model. Sydney really emphasized the importance of modeling. We as coaches need to be really self-reflective and continual development focused so that we continue to learn and adapt to help meet these kids and set the example and model the example. And I love too the importance of curiosity, right? You mentioned being interested instead of interesting. As coaches, that's hard to do because we have fixed mindsets, right? Like we see something, we want to fix it. But I think it's really important that we ask questions and be really curious as to why kids do something in a certain way, or why why they think a certain way. And that helps a lot when you ask questions and clarifying questions. So I just think there were so many great points that you pulled out. The other thing that you mentioned is something that it was early on that we really emphasize in the way we communicate with athletes, is the importance of being a triple impact competitor, which is how do you make yourself better? How do you make your teammates better? And you said, I think, how do you
make the world better?
Yeah, make the world better. And we talk about making the game better, right? So I think there's so much correlation there. And I think just looking at your career and how you've utilized your career to become a great man and be able to pay it forward through all your charity work and everything else has just been incredible. So thank you for this time. It's been really enjoyable.
No, I appreciate you guys. Like I said, I appreciate you guys having me. And one of the things we always talk about is our life experiences that we've been through, the successes that we had. If we don't share some of our pain, but also some of our the good things with other people for them to learn from, then all that talent and all that skill and all that success that you had was really not worth it. And I'm just thankful that I mentioned it before. I read a book called The Purpose-Driven Life by this pastor named Rick Warren, and that changed my mindset, because the first 4 words in that book, it's not about you. And to learn that concept was so hard because my whole life had been about me, and so there are certain things that you learn as you go through life. Every day is a learning experience, and you have a new start. As long as you got a breath in the morning, you got a new start to do something different.
All right. Well, so I have to do a little take homes here, and I have way too much than what we have time for. But so let's kind of go through this a little bit. And I want to share just a few slides with everybody to kind of frame out and think about what we take with us outside of the wonderful strategies that Jimmy already shared with us. But so to get a little academic on us, I did want to kind of call note to when we study sport and we look at sport and how we teach life skills through sport, we oftentimes think about 2 different approaches, right? Where you have a sport and then, your primary focus is on talent development, performance, sport acquisition, talent acquisition. But then you do this plus life skills, right? So when you hear Jimmy talking about it, it's like, I learned how to have tenacity. I heard how to make mistakes and learn from them. I learned how to, right? So in that particular model, which is what we talk mostly about today, is that you basically have kids in sport and they catch life skills, right? Like they're not intentionally necessarily taught them, right? But they kind of grab them when they're in this sport context and they have to demonstrate teamwork and communication and problem solving and discipline. And so the second part of a different approach is called plus sport. And this is another way that we're seeing a lot happen across the country and across the world, really. And this is where the primary focus of sport is on non-performance related outcomes. So you might have kids who are having emotional regulation problems in school. or you might have kids who are involved in the juvenile justice system. You might have kids who need, who are at risk for school dropout, and we want to keep them engaged in sport. And so in this case, it goes back to what I talked about earlier on about the context. Sport is the hook, right? And that we get kids to come through sport, but then we teach these important life skills around, how do I control my anger? How do I learn how to problem solve when faced with this sticky situation of peer pressures? How do I do that in sport, but then also take what I've learned in sport and transfer it into life? And so I want to spend just a second here talking about LiFEsports, which is our program at Ohio State, and kind of grab into this idea of how do we intentionally as coaches teach specific life skills, right? We're really great at teaching how to strike the ball. We're really great at teaching how to shoot, how to use our laces in soccer. We're really great at dribbling the basketball with our fingertips and not having it head high, but waist high. One of the things that we think coaches can get better at is being really intentional about the types of life skills they want to see their kids apply on the field, but also use in real life. And so our example that we have here, which is a national model at Ohio State, is called LiFEsports. And we really have honed in on these 4 social skills. So we teach at LiFEsports self-control, right? How to control your emotions, right? How to, keep your temper down, how to think before you act, right? Effort, which Jimmy, we heard you talk about over and over again, right? How do you put forth 100%, try your best, get back up after failure, and continue to persist, right? Effort. And then teamwork, right? Which is communication, nonverbal, verbal, problem solving, right? Collaborating, right? Working together as a team to get to an outcome. And then this last one, and Jimmy, you hit on this as well, is this idea of social responsibility, right? This is doing the right thing when no one's looking. Being a leader, right, on the field and off the field, right, and sort of this role that we have as being an athlete, and we talk about it as a life sports athlete, right, not just here in our program, but when you approach the world around you, right. And I think, Jim, I heard you talk a lot about what you feel is your social responsibility now, given these past experiences that you've had and the messages you want to carry forward as you go. So at LiFEsports, we call these sets, SETS, right? And we really reinforce them over and over again while kids are playing sport. And then we do a lot to process these life skills and then help the kids transfer them outside of sport. So Sid, show this video really briefly, and then we'll move on. But I want to show one of our LiFEsports campers in our summer camp on campus demonstrate how he did this at the end of a lacrosse session. So go ahead, Sid. So I don't think we can hear him.
There we go. You should be able to hear now.
So playing lacrosse, we can show sets by having some self-control when maybe a call doesn't go the way we wanted it to. We don't have to lash out. We don't have to get mad at our teammates if they may drop a pass. How can we show effort? Hustling for a ground ball. There you go, Sakayla. A+. Teamwork. How can we show good teamwork, guys? Passing it, supporting your teammates. If a ball's on the ground, communicate well with your teammate. Tell them, I got your help. I'm behind you. And then social responsibility. That stands for doing the right thing when nobody's looking, okay? So if the ball goes out of bounds and I don't see it because it was too quick for me to catch, and your teammate might go, you know what, that was out on me. That's social responsibility at its finest, okay? You guys all ready to play some lacrosse? Demonstrate some sets while we're at it? All right, who are my first 2 up for a jump ball? These 2 set it first. All right, guys, ready?
So again, here you can see, right? So Tommy in this video is, aligning everything to just what happened in the lacrosse practice and training, but really intentionally honing in on, hey, what did you do when you played lacrosse? Not just to, cradle the ball the right way, throw the right direction, use the right foot that you started with, but how did you demonstrate sets, right? And then having the kids deliberately talk about it, reflect on it, share about it. And the next thing would be for him to say, how did you use these here, but how are you going to use them when you go home today? when you go back to your neighborhood and when you're at home with your siblings and they're driving you nuts, or you're at school and you have to get ready for a test or a presentation that you're doing. And so again, coaches can get a lot more intentional, right, in teaching life skills the same type of way that they might.
Well, it's interesting because I go back to, again, some videos that I've watched in the past, and there's a great one. It's a round table with Tom Hanks, Adam Sandler, Jamie Foxx, Robert De Niro. They're all sitting around, they're talking about things, and Tom Hanks talks about one of the greatest quotes that's out there that says, "This too shall pass." And he talks about it like saying, you're feeling great, you're having a great day, everything's moving back. This too shall pass. You have a bad day, you woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Guess what? This too shall pass. And if you can live with that kind of mindset, knowing that, this too shall pass, and it's something else is going to happen. I really thought that was a great teaching moment, that these guys, all these successful guys sitting around the table, are simplifying it so easy about what's good and bad in life, and how you should accept either one whenever they happen, and move and hope for the next.
And so great example though, like, okay, let's say you had a bad game, right? And
Yep.
You played the worst you've ever played, right? And this too shall pass. But then for a coach to say, hey, it's just a game, right? There'll be another game tomorrow. And hey, what are you going to do, right, to get better prepared for that next challenge? And then, okay, in real life, right, outside of sport, when you have a bad day or you fail a math test, or, you maybe disappoint your partner, right? This too will pass. How are you going to fix it? How are you going to, get up the next day and remedy it? So great point. Yeah.
And I think, and if I can share one other thing real quick. The other thing that he taught me too was, I would always tell him, he would say at the beginning of the baseball season, you're going to play 30 games, because we were in Ohio. We didn't get to play that many games. He said, you're going to have 100 at bats. What do you want your batting average to be? And I would say, I want to hit 400 or 450, whatever I'd say. He said, okay. And he would sit down with me, and we would write out 0 for 4, 1 for 4, 2 for 3 in each game. And we would put it on a list until we got to 45 out of 100. And every game I would play, he would mark off 0 for 4 or 1 for 4 or 5 for 5, and he taught me. He didn't know, I don't think, that he was teaching me all this, but he was teaching me how to accept good days, bad days, and just kind of average days, and it's like, I've heard people say it before, it's, treat it as 1/3 of your life, 1/3 good, 1/3 bad, and 1/3. So if you do have a bad day, guess what? That's only 1/3, and again, I thought that was something great that my dad taught me at a very young age, to write down that you're going to have success, you're going to have failures, and then you're going to have those days that are just going to kind of be in the middle. And you know what? Accept each one and know that the next day can change.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it's fun to hear you talk like that, Jimmy, because I feel like I'm like, it's deja vu from way back when I was 12 or 10 or something, and you were filled with teachable moments for me as a big brother or friend of the family. So at any rate, thank you so much, Jimmy, and Ryan too, and Sid, for being here with us tonight. There were so many great take homes around how to develop life skills, ways in which you used life skills in sport, and thought about how coaches and your father especially taught them, and even Coach Bass, right? Like, for all his strengths and limitations, right? He really did make a dent in especially your career trajectory. So at any rate, if you get a chance, those of you on the call, please check into the QR code here and fill out an evaluation and give us your input. Also, if you want to get continuing education credits for this 1-hour webinar, even if you watched it live or you're watching it at a later time, fill it out and we'll send that off to you at the end. So last thing, we do have a couple of sessions coming up. Sid, will you flip the PowerPoint one more time? And I'm super excited to talk about next month's session. I believe it's going to be March 20th, and it's going to be focused on managing stress and pressures as coaches, which we saw in the chat a little bit of that coming up. Like, what do I do in this case? This is really stressful. But I promise you, I'm going to have two really awesome high-level coaches that are going to come on and banter with each other as friends about how they manage some of the nuances of coaching and the pressures to win, but also the pressures that they put on themselves to balance their life and their personal and professional kinds of career expectations. So a couple more coming up. If you want additional resources about Coach Beyond, you can find us, next slide, Sid, at the following information. Our website's great. We have past webinars that we've done here on our website, so check those out. Email us. You can also sign up for our LiFEsports, and we'll tell you about upcoming sessions and opportunities we have to support coaches in Ohio. And Ryan, I want to give you a huge shout out, right? And Positive Coaching Alliance, they're an amazing resource all across the country, and especially in Ohio, who do all kinds of wonderful coaching, both with community-based organizations, school and districts all across the country, and are a great asset in terms of their knowledge and ability to build capacity among systems and coaches to do this work better. So I appreciate all of you for being with us. Jimmy, gosh, I want to give you a big hug, and I hope to see you soon. And thank you again. We're really grateful.